There's different types of people out there who are able to practice medicine and prescribe medications. Depending on who you are and what type of medicine you want to receive, that's going to who you're going to gravitate towards. So there's obviously physicians. That's going to be your MD or DO. There's also nurse practitioners who go a completely different route where they're building upon nursing experience to then go into medicine. Then there is the physician assistant, which mirrors slightly the physician route. However, they do a much more truncated journey and they don't really do a residency.
And another thing, let's say that you get somebody who calls you up claiming to be a lawyer. One of the easiest ways to vet them is just say, what's your bar card number? Even if they say, I'm barred through the state of Florida, or I'm barred through New York, you can say, what's your bar card number? They should be able to rattle it off.
Some people who have either lapsed in their board certification or maybe they failed out, they don't want to keep taking the board exam every so many years, then they're still allowed to practice medicine to a certain extent. But there are limitations, especially when it comes to malpractice, right? Malpractice insurance may not fully cover everything that you were board certified to do because you were no longer board certified. Medicine,
law, friendship. This is Dr. Long and Lawyer Nik. You're listening to the Medico-Legal Brief.
One doctor, one lawyer, and a whole lot of gray area.
Well, welcome back, everybody, to the Medico-Legal Brief, where medicine meets the law. I'm Lawyer Nik. I'm with Dr. Long. And again, Long, you're in town. We get to podcast together. Super, super fun. I like when we get to have these discussions. I feel it's a little bit more natural than just us standing behind a computer screen trying to podcast that way.
Yeah, always a good time to hang out with you, especially as we get to go eat and enjoy Texas food because I don't get to have that as much up in Wisconsin. What's our topic for today?
This is a pretty interesting topic. How to screen appropriately for the right doctor or the right lawyer. A lot of people, they'll make a decision as to, okay, I need a doctor, I need a lawyer, but they don't necessarily know where to start as to how to select the best doctor, lawyer for them. Sometimes it's looking for the cheapest. Sometimes it's looking for the best. And other times you just find yourself in a spot where you're just asking recommendations and what you get is not actually what you need. It's a pretty important topic to figure out how you figure out who the best is for you in that industry.
And I will say it's probably a little hard to find the right fit for you in a medical world because you have the insurances and what's a network, what's out of network versus what a lawyer is looking for. A lawyer, you can probably just go to anyone. I just want to make sure if it's reputable.
Yes, very much so. And that's a good place to start. When you're looking for any professional, you need to make sure they're licensed. Out the gate, you need to make sure that your lawyer is licensed. You need to make sure that your doctor is licensed. So I'll ask you this from a medical perspective. When you're looking for somebody who's licensed, what are you looking for?
So actually, from a medical perspective, you may not be one of the first things you look for because you just assume that if someone is employed, that they are licensed. And that's usually the case. But when you start doing more private practices or shops that open their own shingle, like especially here in Texas, a lot of people go out on their own. Sometimes they actually don't have how should I say this? They are not board certified. They are licensed to practice. Obviously, they graduated from medical school, graduated residency, but they have not maintained a board certification. Because if you're opening your own practice, there you do not have to maintain a board. The board is really for you to be employed.
Okay, you're blowing my mind.
I know.
So you're telling me that as a medical professional, if somebody had their own practice, as a doctor, they could hang out their own shingle and not be board certified?
Correct.
Is that something you want? Is that not something you want?
Again, it depends on the doctor, depends on the physician. Another big reason other than the board taking your money every single year is to maintain their organization.
Mm-hmm.
They take their fees that way, but they also may help you maintain your continuing medical education, right? So it forces you into a schedule that you have to maintain a certain amount of hours. You're going to a certain amount of conferences so that you stay on top of the most modern medicine. Whereas someone who's not maintaining your board certification, it's on the onus of that physician whether or not they want to continue to keep up with the times or not. Sometimes they don't. That's okay in the view of the medical society.
Okay, that is definitely different from the legal lawyer perspective because it is, and this might be similar, we'll get to that in a second, but it is against the law to practice law without a license. Now, you can represent yourself. You can't just go represent other people. I'm licensed in Texas, so I would assume I pay dues to the State Bar of Texas. They also manage my CLEs, my continuing legal education. So every year I get a nice little invoice in the mail. It says I owe so much for membership fee. I also have a tracker of you've done this much CLE hours, so you owe us this much by said date, and they manage the whole thing for us. Now, if you don't pay those dues, you don't do your COEs, your license can then go bye-bye. And you are no longer licensed to practice law in that state. Now, I can be licensed to practice law in another state and that my license here in Texas lapse, but that's not something you want to do. So that's where I start with, hey, you got to make sure that your lawyer that you're selected is licensed. And you can go online, go to the State Bar website. It just is as simple as typing someone's name and typing in State Bar of Texas. And on that website, it'll show up with their name, their bar number, where they graduated from law school, what year they graduated, whether they have any disciplinary action. So that's kind of like the first start for lawyers. But it sounds like for doctors, the board and the state bar are similar. They're almost the same function because, again, the fees help pay for the things that the state bar needs. It also sounds like for doctors, there's like this way to do it outside of the official board.
Because again, some people who have either lapsed in their board certification or they just don't want to, or maybe they failed out, they don't want to keep taking the board exam every so many years. They're still allowed to practice medicine to a certain extent, but there are limitations, especially when it comes to malpractice, right? Malpractice insurance may not fully cover everything that you were board certified to do because you were no longer board certified. So you can still do some day-to-day things, especially as a physician. I can still prescribe medication. I can still do potentially minor procedures, but I'm not going to be able to go and work in the hospital because I'm no longer board certified. So there's a lot of restrictions that come with it, but then that's also why those doctors that go out, they use the title doctor because they are a doctor. But now they've pivoted into a completely different field, whether that's integrative medicine or whether they're now selling supplements, or they've just pivoted into a completely different realm, but then they are using the title physician to pull patients in.
Now, is there any law against practicing medicine out of license, similar to legal?
Absolutely. You would you go to jail. I mean, I'm sure there's been a couple cases in Florida where there are 18 and 20-year-olds who didn't even graduate college, go out, they like open, yeah, look it up. They open up their own practice, and somehow patients fall for it and they go in and they botch up something and they get sent to jail. And so yes, there's absolutely ramifications for practicing or falsely practicing as a physician. The other thing that we want to look for is it's not just the certification, but whether or not your physician is a physician. So right now there is a lot of providers is what the term is being used, broadly used, is there's different types of people out there who are able to practice medicine and prescribe medications. And sometimes the waters can be muddied and maybe the titles are not explicitly told. There's a patient for every, there's a provider for every patient. So depending on who you are and what type of medicine you want to be, to receive, that's going to who you're going to gravitate towards. So there's obviously physicians, that's going to be your MD or DO. There's also nurse practitioners who go a completely different route where they're building upon nursing experience to then try to practice medicine or go into medicine. Then there is the physician assistant, which mirrors slightly the physician route. However, they do a much more truncated journey and they don't really do a residency. And both nurse practitioners and physician assistants, they actually learn on the job, almost like an apprenticeship. So the majority of their education will come when they're seeing actual patients. Whereas a physician, they are also seeing patients, but they are seeing it under the supervision of a senior physician. And they're not allowed to go out and practice on their own until they get graduated and completed those 3 years. Nurse practitioners and physician assistants do not. They can go into the field that they are interested in and then practice in it for 1 or 2 years, and then they can transition into a completely different field. So go from cardiology down to surgery and then over to dermatology. As long as someone is willing to hire them, they're able to do that, and their license allows that. Whereas a physician, we are siphoned into our specialty, and that's what we to do for the rest of our career. If I ever wanted to transition out of family medicine and go to surgery, I'd have to go back to residency and do a 5-year residency. If I wanted to go and do dermatology, then one, I could do better on my boards and actually get into the dermatology residency, but then I would be repeating residency. So there's a lot more restrictions on a physician's education. Again, there are good and bad apples within every profession. And so you have to find the right fit for you. Do you feel like you need a physician's expertise, or do you feel like your medical health or your health priorities are in line with your nurse practitioner or physician assistant? All can provide um, good care. It's whether or not it's good enough care or the optimal, efficient care that is needed for your personal health.
And this might be a good segue, but we had a question from one of our listeners. Her name's Val. And Val wanted to know about how AI impacts situations like those. I know we did our AI episode, but she was asking about how she's seen these advertisements about medical assistance via AI and so on and so forth. Do you think that it's ever going to get to a point where AI is the doctor prescribing things and allowing those prescriptions to go through with them diagnosing and so on and so forth?
AI that we see today, no, I don't think we're there yet. We're a long time away. I actually don't think that we'll ever hit that point in time until after I'm long gone from this planet. There's just so much nuance within medicine that you still need human to distinguish between what's right and what's wrong. Yes, AI is able to pull from a lot of data points, so the knowledge is there. It's putting it together in the right pieces for the right patient. That's hard. And I don't know if we'll ever get there again in our lifetime.
That would be very interesting to see where you log on the client and Peter is telling you, well, I have just prescribed you a Z-Pack.
What I do foresee, though, is maybe truncating education is a part on that path, is that a lot of people who are doing less education and then supplementing the gaps in knowledge with AI. So using AI as a tool to then help them diagnose the initial diagnosis without having to go through the full education.
The same thing happens with law. You can rely on AI to run a bunch of different data scenarios, give you a bunch of different information, point you in the right direction. I mean, I've done it myself for contractual stuff, contractual terms, where I've just said, hey, this is kind of what I need. Give me everything behind it, even to the point where sometimes I even ask for case law and it'll pretty accurately pull case law from the Supreme Court, so on and so forth, as to what is applicable. And granted, we've talked about this in AI episode, I don't want to go on a tangent, but you always have to check and adjust and fact check and make sure that what's being spit out is accurate and useful.
So I have a question then. So you said that you obviously want to make sure that your lawyer or attorney that you're looking for is licensed. How do you go about doing that? Are they allowed to falsely say that they are licensed or not licensed? Or do they have to explicitly say that they are licensed on their website or on their card? Or like, how do you find that?
So every lawyer is given a bar card. I do not have my wallet with me right now, but it looks like I actually do have this. Every lawyer has a bar card, and it almost looks fake. Like, this is my barcode. It's like State Bar of Texas. It's just sign on the back.
It's almost like a credit card.
Almost looks like when you're at one of those joke shops when you're buying like the card that's like, a McLovin Hawaii, driver's license. That's what it looks like.
Well, can that be falsely made or created? Because it doesn't look like there's any bar or any stand.
I've never heard of it, but I'm sure it could happen. I mean, everything could be, what am I looking for? Plagiarized nowadays.
Well, obviously, I'm not going up to every lawyer and asking, hey, show me your bar card.
So you go to the State Bar website. So when you go to the State Bar website, you can type in the name and it'll show you all the credentials. It'll show you their bar card number. It'll show you, like I mentioned earlier, the date that they were barred, as well as if there's disciplinary actions. So that's how you make sure. The other thing is, in every law office, they should have their license to practice law hung up in their office. And in Texas, the license to practice law is like this big. It's bigger than a diploma. You can't miss it. And so that is technically supposed to be hanging up in the office. So when you arrive, I'm sure it's the same for doctors, like to go into the office, there's credentials that exist somewhere in that office. Same thing for a lawyer. The credentials are there.
It's actually not a requirement to have it up.
Is it not?
Some people like to have it up. Some people don't. Most people actually have it in their personal office, and patients never actually see it.
Really? Okay. Usually when you're going into someone's office, you'll see their license to practice law on the wall.
So I'm trying to think. Last couple of attorneys that I come across were actually recommendations. So I've never actually looked up this the licensing stuff. I just assume that the patients or the friends that have recommended me to them are telling me they licensed attorneys. It's interesting.
And another thing too is, let's say that you get somebody who calls you up claiming to be a lawyer. One of the easiest ways to vet them is just say, what's your bar card number? because we are all given a serial number that identifies us. So even if they say, I'm barred through the state of Florida, or I'm barred through New York, you can say, what's your bar card number? They should be able to rattle it off. I've memorized mine. They should be able to rattle it off, and you should be able to, again, go look for their bar card certification on the state bar website. And that's a way to figure out whether or not they're licensed.
So once you found that the lawyer is licensed, how do you get an idea of this person's personality? Like, what is the typical? Do you just have to actually meet them in person?
One thing that you touched on is first you're looking at recommendations. You're asking your social circle, you're actually asking your network, who do you recommend? I have this issue. Very similar to when I'm looking for a doctor. No, I have this problem. I need a good family doctor. Hey, I need to see somebody from my back. Do you recommend anybody? And at that point, usually you're pretty good on a recommendation. Like, I trust recommendations. You just mentioned you trust recommendations. But if you don't have anybody, you don't have a network to give you the recommendation, what's the next thing people do? They look up Google reviews. They look up Yelp reviews. So at that point, you want to go see if that lawyer is in fact somebody that practices in the area that you need help. If I'm going through a divorce, I'm not actually going to sit back and then try to find out a personal injury attorney. If I need a will drafted, I'm not going to search out a criminal defense attorney. So looking on the website is probably the first thing that you can do. Now, when you're trying to figure out whether or not you mesh with that lawyer, you're going to want to actually set up a client consultation. So it's almost like layered. You want to first get that recommendation. You want to find that individual that practices in the area. Then you're essentially going to call up and set up a client consultation. And like I said, we'll get to that. Or it's different in medical though, because whenever I want to go see a doctor, not only do I have to do my research and figure out the Yelp reviews and the 4 stars, 5 stars, but I have to make sure my insurance is there. I have to make sure that I don't need a referral from a family physician. If I'm switching my family physician, that seems like a pain because then there's sometimes a wait time to get in to see the physician. So before we even get into the office, what does that look like for you guys?
So it comes down to your insurance. Whatever insurance you have, whether that's from Marketplace, whether that's from your employer, is going to determine which network of physicians you're able to see. So if your local network is a specific company, like hopefully your insurance will cover that specific hospital system, because otherwise you're going to be traveling a lot further away to see the next hospital system as a neighbor. So start there, look in network, and you're usually able to go onto your insurance's website and do a search on who is in network and which family physicians are available to you. Once you get several names, or at least once you get the hospital system that your insurance covers, you can then go to the hospital system's website. Once you find the hospital system, you then go onto their website, and then you can do a broader search of specifically, do you want to see internal medicine? Do you want to see family medicine? That's usually the first person that you see in the system is your primary care physician. Once you see them, then if you need any other specialists, you usually do require a referral out. The next step after you search is that most, if not every, physician will have a profile. So you go through their profile, check out their education, where did they train, where are they from, get a vibe. And it really comes down to if you connect, like you have enough in common. It's almost kind of like dating. Did we grow up in the same area? Can we speak the same language? Do we have the same interests? Because on the bias, you'll talk about, do you have 2 kids, wife, husband? Do they like to travel? What are their hobbies? And so those are things to kind of you build a personality for this physician that you're imagining that you're going to go see. And then the next step is is usually a video. So I really like the video because it really helps give a little snippet of not only how the physician talks, but how they communicate, their voice. Do you like the cadence? Do you like the speed? Are they expressing their thoughts clearly in the way that you would understand? So it's really important to watch those videos. And that's usually how most patients find me, is that they look at the biography, they look at the video, and they say, this really aligns with how I want to proceed in life and how I want my health to be communicated to me.
It's very similar for lawyers. It goes to how technologically savvy they are, how good of an marketer they are. I've worked for a lawyer that really didn't care about marketing. She was very word of mouth. I've also seen other lawyers that it is very important for them to run their social media, run their Instagram page, on their website. They have all the bells and whistles. And then, of course, we talked about the corporate aspect of law, to where you might go to a law firm's webpage, and then at that point, you filter by attorney, And then you hit exactly what you were saying, where it's like a biography splash page. It's where they've gone to law school, where they went to undergrad, their specialties. It also has like journal entries or symposiums or where they've been speakers. And so it has all these other additional bits of information that you can judge that professional on.
Another important way to filter out your physician is just seeing the location. Are they near you? Do you want to travel the distance? Do you want to travel, stay close, local, or do you want to go a little further to maybe get a different type of physician? So that's also another guide or filter that you can add on. Another important filter is whether or not you want a male, a female, for what type of issues are you dealing with, whether or not they have expertise in that. And then at the end of the day, if you go and meet your physician and you don't like them, guess what? You can actually switch at any point in time. It happens quite a bit for physicians. We understand that it's part of what is expected. Patients will come and go depending on what they need. And if we're not providing what they need, they can find a different person.
So I have a few different comments on that. As far as the legal aspect of finding somebody in your area, I also agree that that's super important. But the difference with law, which is different than medicine, is the fact that you can be sued anywhere in the country. So if you do something in Florida, you can be sued in Florida. If you partake in commerce and I'm shipping something from Texas to California, I could then be sued in court in California. So there's these instances, especially in a big state like Texas, where I might have a client who is down in Houston and I'm over here in Fort Worth. Well, I need to make a decision as to whether or not counsel in Houston would be more appropriate for the sake of going to court, going to hearings, going to depositions. And so that's also very important as far as when you're selecting a lawyer is where are you getting sued? Where is the venue, as they call it in law? And do you want to hire an attorney that has to then charge you for traveling to that place? Or do you want to hire somebody that's local? A lot of times what lawyers would do, they'll actually say, hey, look, I'm just going to co-counsel with somebody that's local. That way I'll work with them down there. They'll manage everything down there, but I'll still be your point of contact. Now, when it goes to other states, that's where things get a little muddy. Because if I'm licensed in Texas, I cannot practice law in California. I'm going to need to find counsel in California. So that's my first comment as far as location. My second comment, though, is a complaint. Because from medicine, it takes forever as a new patient to go see at least a primary. Medical issues are usually very pressing. So if I have something that happens and I go to see a primary and I don't like that primary, it's going to be a pain to then find another primary within insurance and move to that doctor. So is there an easier way for that to exist? Or is it as simple as I see you, you're in this specific network, you're in this specific hospital system. So I'm just going to see the next doctor that's in that hospital system that's one door over.
Trying to find the quickest is it's going to be a partner within that same group, because then the person that you're going to be talking to, they can open up the schedule right away and tell you exactly, okay, this is the next opening. If you want to schedule an established care visit with them, that would be the easiest. But of course, you can go to the competitor's hospital system, and as long as it's in network, again, it really is dependent on your insurance. And you can call them and say, hey, I'm trying to get in. And yes, primary care physicians are really needed at this time. There's not enough of us to go around to help patients, but I also think that comes down to practice style. I know that for my personal patients, I tell them every time I meet them for the first time that, hey, I want to make this a very unique experience. That if you ever need me at any point in time, that I'm available for you within reason. That within, if I am working in the office, I will always squeeze you in same day if you need to. And that's the one thing I want to be able to offer my patients. Not a lot of people do that because everyone packs their schedule a little differently. But I always pack it enough so that I can allow at least 2 to 3 patients in on the same day, very last minute if needed. And the reason I like doing that is because as their primary care physician, I want to be able to know them at their worst, but also at their best. And so that we get to know each other as we grow in this relationship, so that any last minute issues, sometimes maybe you don't need to come in because I know you so well. Maybe we just treat it just based on a message or a phone call. And so the only way to build that relationship is by being available to them. And so again, I tell my patients that if I'm working, which is usually Monday through Friday, except Wednesday, those are the only 4 days you can get sick, is Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday. Every other day, you might have to go to the urgent care, you might have to go to the emergency room. But then I also counsel them on things that, hey, if you are not having a heart attack or stroke and you don't feel like you're dying, probably don't have to go to the emergency room. If it's a small little cut, laceration, or rash, is it something that is bothering you so much that you need it fixed immediately? Or can you wait a day or two to come see me in the office instead? That's based on your decision, your comfort. Unfortunately, those are things that you cannot tweeze out when you look at a physician's profile or the website. It's something that you have to actually meet the doctor and get to know them and actually ask them.
That's so much different than law, because when you are a lawyer for somebody, you are generally their only lawyer. Outside of if you're at a firm and there's multiple associates or multiple lawyers working on that one case. But if I'm a solo practitioner, it's only me. I cannot send my client to a urgent care version of the law. So if some, and we always joked, and when I was in family law, we always joked that everything that happens always happens between the hours of 5 p.m. and 5 a.m. All the fights, all the cheating, the kids coming into play, it always happened after hours. So you always kind of had to be available, because if it's 2 o'clock in the morning and cops show up at your client's home, you want to make yourself accessible so your client doesn't do something that ends up messing up their case or putting them in harm or ending with them going to jail. So there's no urgent care version of it. Depending on your standard for an attorney, you might have to ask those same questions as to: when are you available? How can I reach you? Are you 24/7? Do you have a call service? Am I going to be filtered through to a paralegal or an office manager? Or in some instances, can I just have your cell phone number? And sometimes it's as simple as that. I've gotten many texts really late at night asking for legal advice, and I've responded. And of course, I've gotten billed for it, but it's still that weird realm of I need to make myself available because of the fact that a lawsuit or a case or a legal thing, might not in the normal business hours.
And you put up a great point, is that yes, in medicine, we are unique in that you can go to an urgent care or you can see a colleague that's in the system or in the same office. That's another important aspect that you want to keep in mind, is that maybe if you don't get to see your physician, do you trust the other doctors, physician assistants, and nurse practitioners within the office? Because that may also be a rule in and rule out. Because if you're not able to see your doctor every single time, you might have to see these other people. But if you don't trust them, then why are you going to this doctor that you're not seeing that often? So you might have to keep that in mind when you're deciding whether or not you're comfortable joining a specific practice. Obviously, if it's a private practice and it's the only physician, you're out of luck. If you can't reach the doctor, then you have to go to an urgent care that is a standalone or different from the private practice.
Is that ever frustrating for doctors, where you might have a certain medical plan with a patient, and then whether they are histrionic and always think something's going on, or whether it's actually something that is a legitimate cause for concern, that they may end up at the urgent care and ER for the weekend, they're under a different physician's care, and whatever that physician does could end up essentially messing with your medical plan? Is that frustrating?
I wouldn't say frustrating. It's part of the way our health system works, is that they are seeing so many different people, so many hands in the cookie jar, that it just happens. And so I try to lay out my plan, whether that is medication adjustments, titration, workups, very openly in my notes, so that the patient understands the plans, that they can advocate for themselves, but also so that other physicians who are on the same system, they can view my notes and understand that. But that's also why I really, really love that I can give my patients the opportunity to see me, so that there isn't any deviation from the plan, that we know that every time you see me, whether that's for a sick issue or just for a well visit, that we're always going to be on the same plan together, on the same journey, and that we're making decisions together, versus you seeing someone random that may decide something different. But yes, that happens a lot. I see a patient that goes, it's an antibiotic, and I'm like, why are they on that specific antibiotic? Do you really need to be on an antibiotic? We've been through this before, and you never need it. So we've yes, we see that quite a bit. And remember, in different settings, in an urgent care and an emergency room, their goal is to triage you. They want to make sure that you're not dying, and then get you out in a stable condition. So they're going to order every test underneath the sun that's going to get you to that safety zone. Whereas in a physician's office or in a primary care office, our goal is to keep you healthy. You're already doing okay. We just got to keep maintaining or improving your health. So things don't need to happen quickly, and we have to be more. We have to be more cost effective. We have to think about, okay, the labs that we're ordering, the tests that we're ordering, is it appropriate to actually lead us to an answer, or is it going to take us down more rabbit holes that will end up costing you and the system more money.
I found that interesting because I teed off my pediatrician with something, and you were actually involved in this. I told you about it, but something had happened over the weekend. I called the nurse's hotline. Their response was just, hey, go to the urgent care. And I then hit you up and I sent you some videos and pictures, and you said, well, actually, this isn't an urgent care thing. Go ahead and just monitor it. You can wait till you see your pediatrician on Monday, Tuesday. And when I went back to the pediatrician, I thought I had done the pediatrician a solid. I said, hey, like it wasn't that big of an issue. I talked to my buddy, and she actually seemed a little put off by the fact that I had reached out to somebody else, because she said, well, my nurse guided you to this aspect. This was my medical plan. She is under my care. And that was the first realization of like, oh, okay, there might be some, I don't want to say like professional territory, but more so like, hey, this is my patient. I'm liable for this patient. I'm overseeing this patient's medical plan. You can't keep going other places, or you're going to frustrate what I'm trying to do for my patient.
And I understand our perspective because we lay out these protocols to help guide patients to safe, safe healthcare. And so sometimes it's a wider net that needs to be cast so that patients can get the care that they need, especially when the doctors are on their off hours at home. And so, yes, sometimes it's overly triaged inappropriately, but that's what's needed so that we can have our sanity and our work-life balance. I don't know if I would absolutely say that I would get frustrated in a situation like that if we had gone to an urgent care or had called a buddy. At the end of the day, if the patient was still safe and healthy and it was just a minor inconvenience, then I'd brush it off and say, okay, let's move on to your next thing.
And then the funny thing about it was that your diagnosis was exactly what her diagnosis was. And on top of that, her I guess, plan to take care of it was the exact same plan you've had. And so you guys were both spot on. But my concern came from the fact that in that night, I would have had to take her to urgent care. I would have had to stay there for a few hours. I would have been charged, have to deal with insurance. It was just something that stood out. I get it as a lawyer. You don't want your person going to other lawyers. And I've had this happen in the past where I've recommended somebody and that client has then come to me and said, hey, I know I'm working with so and so, but like they said this and they said that and they said this and they said that. Should I be doing this? And I try not to interfere because they're under the care of that other lawyer. That lawyer has a plan for them. And so I have to say, hey, you need to just trust your lawyer. And I'm not going to give you the legal advice because I'm not your lawyer. That other person is your lawyer. So I see where that overlap can come and how that can mess things up.
Well, I want to kind of get back to the topic we had, which was screening and finding your lawyer, your physician. And so it sounds like we found what we think is a good fit. In those situations where it does not become a good fit, I said in the medical field, you can just find a new person. But what if there is a situation where you've been robbed? The lawyer did something completely out of the ordinary and it was actually illegal. What are the ramifications? Or does the lawyer just get away? Like, is there anything on the back end? And maybe you don't want to give these secrets out because you don't want any of your colleagues to get sued or.
Well, let me take it a few steps back. For you, we talked about patient entering the room, and now you're working with the patient. Well, for us, you need to go through what's called a client consultation. And so a client consultation is very, very important. I recommend everybody go shop for a lawyer if you need to. Some client consultations are free. Some people charge for the client consultations. Sometimes if they're free, you're only getting 30 minutes to walk into the office. Sometimes if you're paying, you might be there for 3 hours. But remember, you can always ask for a client consult and ask for the details when you call up the firm or call up the lawyer. These are very, very important for screening because it allows you to, just like a patient would, it allows you to explain what's going on. It allows you to get all out there. The lawyer can then make an assessment as to whether or not you have a case. They can also make an assessment as to whether or not they want you as a client. So in the law, it goes both ways. The law firm or lawyer needs to be as comfortable taking you on as a client as you would hiring them as a lawyer. So if you can get past that part of finding the lawyer, you're in a very good spot. And things you want to look for somebody that vibes with you. You want to look for somebody that you can trust, you feel like is ethical and moral, and you can have a day-to-day conversation with. You might be in the gutter with them for the next year, 2 years, 3 years. Can you be with them for that time? If they have a quirk or if they talk down to you or if they do something that pisses you off, you may not want that person as an attorney. Same thing as an attorney getting a client, where if that client is going to upset you or blow up your phone or be histrionic to things, you may not want them as a client. So you got to find that good balance. Now, to your question, once you're in the thick of things, you're in the thick of the lawsuit, you're in the thick of filing, you're in the thick of defending, whatever it may be, there is recourse to your lawyer doing bad things. You can always sue your lawyer. And a lawyer can always sue their client. Usually, if that happens, it's over money. If a lawyer is suing a client, contractual terms, but it's bad for business to sue clients. All it takes is one review that says, "Hey, my lawyer ended up suing me," and somebody might say, I don't want to touch that." But as far as being a client, you really want to make sure that you're having open and honest conversations with your lawyer. It's just hard because when you're sitting there and there's a trial or a hearing, you see your lawyer doing this or that, and you're wondering, is this the right thing that should be happening? And as I just mentioned a few minutes ago, I don't want you going to go talk to a bunch of other lawyers because they don't know what I'm trying to do. So if you go talk to your lawyer friend and say, well, my attorney said this during the hearing, they may not have the context and they may say, oh, that shouldn't have happened. But it's also concerning because how do you know that your lawyer is actually doing a good job? Results show that. If you're winning the trial, if you're losing the trial, if you're in mediation and you're settling in favor of what you want or not, like those things can have an impact as to your perception of how well your lawyer is doing. If you lose a trial, if you get sent to jail, your first response is, I just had a crappy lawyer. My lawyer didn't do everything they were supposed to do. I should have won this. Well, that could be the case, or the facts just weren't on your side. Like the law wasn't on your side. There was just nothing that could be done to let you win that case or get your settlement or so on and so forth. So there is recourse. It's just very hard in certain situations to prove. You can file with the state bar, you can file complaints, you can sue them. But usually the things that catch lawyers are messing with money. If you are commingling funds, if you are not charging appropriately, like that's very apparent. You can follow the paper trail. The other thing that's very apparent is not communicating and your lawyer not showing up for hearings. So if you can show that your lawyer didn't show up for the hearing, if you called and called and called and the lawyer wasn't returning your phone calls, if you went 3 or 4 months without hearing from your attorney, those are issues. And those can end up leading to a lawyer being disbarred. You always are in your right to go speak to another lawyer. But one of the first things a lawyer is going to ask you in a client consultation is, have you talked to any other lawyers? And if so, what's the situation there? And at that point, a lawyer may be able to guide you as to like, you should probably fire that lawyer. I'll take on your case. Or they might say, hey, no, I'm not going to overstep. Your lawyer's doing exactly what they should be doing. You need to go continue to work with that.
So it sounds like just like the medical field, we deal with these Yelp reviews or Google reviews. And do you find that a lot of the reviews are accurate? Because in the medical field, I feel like the ones that write reviews are the ones that are just really, really pissed off, whether that's true or not. Sometimes it gets exaggerated. And then there are very few where they actually take the time out where they've had the best experience, put it. But I do think it skews on the negative side majority of the time. And I wonder if that's how.
I feel the exact same way. When you're looking at those Yelp reviews, the people that are pissed off the most are the loudest. And they will go to Google, they will go to Yelp, and they will leave that 1-star review. They would leave a 0-star review if they can. And what you might see is in a year, a lawyer might have 100 clients, and that one client was upset, left that negative review. You don't see the 99 other positive reviews because most people are just fine with, hey, you did an amazing job. Thank you so much. And then you have to ask them for a review. Hey, do you mind leaving a review? And yeah, your fingers crossed, you hope that they get around to it. It's usually the people that are the most distraught, that are the most angry. And those are the people that sometimes didn't have a chance at winning the case, or their perspective of what a lawyer should be is so skewed that it's a 1-star review. That's definitely there. That if you took, same thing with doctors, if you took all the satisfied clients, all the happy clients, and you forced them to write a review, you would see a 99.9% 5 stars to that 0.1%, 1 star.
Again, it sounds like looking for a doctor, looking for a lawyer really sounds like a dating. Finding
It
the right
is.
person that fits you and your personality. But give us a summary briefly. Again, what are the steps to find that really good lawyer to match you? And then I'll my summary.
So if you guys are trying to find a lawyer, first and foremost, you got to recognize what area of law you're going to be in. Divorce, a will, personal injury, criminal. Ask your network, ask your recommendations. You can even, find legal aid on the state's website or just type in legal aid in my area and they'll be able to put you in contact with certain lawyers. But after recommendations, Google, Yelp, scroll through, look at the reviews, obviously be cognizant of those 1-star reviews. But usually there's something good out there. Look at the time they've practiced, look at where they're coming from, see if they have any disciplinary actions. And then from there, start making your phone calls. Start calling the law firm, scheduling your client consultation. Usually with legal issues, they're very, very pressing. So you want to get in quick. If you have to respond to a petition within 10 days, you want to make sure that the lawyer you're trying to get in can get you in within those 10 days. And then after that, you're having the conversation. Make sure you feel comfortable with them. Make sure that it's going to be a good fit. Just like you said, it does feel like dating. You might be attached to this person for months, if not years. So you want to make sure you guys vibe. And with lawyers specifically, though, you want to also be able to take everything with a grain of salt in the sense of a lawyer is going to give you bad news. If it's bad news, it's going to be bad news. You can't just hear that bad news and say, no, you're wrong. They're trying to be honest with where you have a case or where you don't have a case. And then after that point, try to trust your lawyer, be honest with your lawyer. Don't lie to your lawyer, just like you don't lie to your doctor. And then check in and just as you go. If you have any problems with your lawyer that you end up hiring, make sure you communicate those. Paper trails are always important. Emails, phone calls, text messages, all super important. And making sure you guys are just on the same place as far as communication and expectations. So I'm going to ask you the same thing for doctors.
Yeah.
What are you looking for?
Quick summary on how to find your physician is obviously making sure they're in network. So go to your insurance website and just see which health system, hospital system, specific names that you're looking for. I usually then would recommend going based on recommendations. I'm sure that you have a family member, friends that are seeing a specific physician that they enjoy. So maybe let's check their profile out first. And the other thing you want to keep in mind is whether or not there is difference in education that you would like to experience, whether that is a physician, MD, DO, versus a physician assistant, which is a PA, or a nurse practitioner, which is an NP. So again, depending on what you need, those are the different providers that are available to you. I would then go to the website of the health system. You're looking at their profile, making sure that the education is there, they're licensed, they're board certified, seeing if their interests and their expertise is there. Do they do dermatologic procedures? Do they do injections? Maybe you're someone that's older that has joint issues and you need injections once in a while. Is your family physician going to be able to do that, or are they going to have to send you out? So those are things to think about. And then there's usually a video attached to the profile so that you can hear the physician talk. See if it meshes with the communication style that you need. Are they soft spoken? Are they more concrete in their answers and they're straight to the point? Those are things that you want to tweeze out before you actually meet that person. Next step is then to actually make the appointment. Are they booked out 6 months? Are they booked out till next week? I wouldn't necessarily use that as a reason to rule in or rule out a physician. Some systems will not allow a physician to keep open slots. And so you may be booked out till 6 or 7 months, whereas some other systems will allow physicians to keep an open slot every other day. And so you may be able to get into them sooner. So again, don't put that on the onus of the physician, but it may be on the health system. And then finally, when you actually meet the physician, make sure you guys have the same goals and health journey in mind. And if you don't mesh, then you can always find a different person, whether that's the same office or in a different system. That is a great place to end our conversation here on the Medical Legal Brief. Hopefully that was really helpful on how to screen and find a good fit for your lawyer and your doctor. If you guys haven't already, please make sure you subscribe, follow, comment on our content, and watch us on Spotify and YouTube. And again, we post on Wednesdays, so make sure you find us and follow us.
Yes, we're doctors. Yes, we're lawyers. No, this podcast is not medical or legal advice. Do not take anything we say as a reason to perform your own heart surgery, represent yourself in court, or diagnose your neighbor's rash. This is for entertainment only. Think of it like hanging out with your smartest, wittiest friends, not a substitute for an actual appointment. If you act on anything we say without talking to your own professional, that's on you. Seriously, don't do that.